the Caribbean. She created caribBEING, spearheaded the designation and development of Little Caribbean, and is the head of Caribbean partnerships for the U.S. Department of Commerce. Her multi-platform and cross-cultural activations have been featured by Black Enterprise, NBC, and Hyperallergic. And she has been personally profiled in the New York Times and Good Morning America. Please join me in welcoming Shelley Worrell.
Good morning, everyone. Or is it afternoon yet? Okay, still morning. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about building community. A lot of the work that we have been working on over the last 5 years has been really doubled, or I should say rather since the pandemic. We made a very intentional shift to double down on our work in Flatbush, Brooklyn, which is where I was born and raised and still live. Anyone here from Flatbush? Okay, good. I know we're a little in the cut from Flatbush, but Utica is sort of our through line. So I like to describe our work as the intersection of Caribbean culture, community, and commerce. And by commerce, we are talking about the Black and largely Afro-Caribbean businesses that are on the ground in Flatbush, Brooklyn. We're also a curated hub for creativity. Our audience is definitely global in reach, but very, very hyper-local in presence. And that was always very intentional because, of course, Brooklyn and New York City has one of the largest, the largest, and most diverse Caribbean population in the world. And I like to say that Flatbush is the epicenter of that community. And very unique in that it's really, really uniquely diverse. So when you look at other communities that are very Caribbean, like let's say in London or in Paris, Toronto, Montreal, they're very language focused, whereas here we really have the entire diaspora represented. And when you look at the census data, so I'm no longer at the census, so that's probably an old bio, but I was the head of Caribbean partnerships for the U.S. Census Bureau for the 2020 census. And when you look at the demographics in New York City, 5 of the 10 top immigrant populations are of Caribbean descent. So that's Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Guyana. So our work is not only is it inclusive of the entire Caribbean, so my first degree is in anthropology and Caribbean studies. So the way I define the Caribbean is a very sort of academic way. So it's from Cuba down to Trinidad, as well as basin countries, including Panama, Colombia, Belize, all of the Guyanas, et cetera, Honduras. So we are very inclusive. And then, of course, we like to create immersive experiences across New York, as well as beyond. So we've done programming elsewhere, not only in the States, but also abroad as well. So we are a unique voice in the Caribbean community. I think when we first started many, many years ago, one of the unique things is that a lot of people would talk about themselves very island specific. They will say, well, I'm Jamaican, I'm Trinidadian, I'm Haitian. And now, I think a lot more people are really embracing their Caribbean American identity, or what we call caripolitan, which is also part of our portfolio, which is this very urban Caribbean experience. Stephanie was one of the first to adopt the term back when we conceptualized it. But we also are global, as I mentioned, just through social media and us being sort of very digitally savvy. I used to work prior to my work in this space. I worked in tech, I worked at Google, so we very much look at our work, digital, as a very important tool for community and social engagement. Of course, we curate a lot of programming. We've, to date, have curated hundreds of programs. Many of you may have participated or engaged at events that we've done at Brooklyn Museum or Prospect Park, downtown Brooklyn, Queens Museum, and elsewhere. Right now we're in residency at Governor's Island, so hopefully you all will come and visit. We also produce our own branded merch, and we also produce This year will be our 7th annual Caribbean-themed holiday market, and we'll be expanding that a bit this year. So we also lead walking tours. We've been doing that for many, many years. So when we launched Little Caribbean, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the presentations, one of the things that I thought about is like, okay, you have this, and so what? How are people really going to experience the neighborhood? So we lead tours. I'm sorry, I don't have all my glasses. And then, we also create spaces like the caribBEING House. And then we also consult. So we've worked with organizations like NISCA. Many of you are familiar with the New York Foundation for the Arts. And then SBS also contracted us to teach a cultural entrepreneur boot camp many years ago. So our work is really in these 4 buckets. A lot of people, they kind of come to our work through different sort of umbrellas. So of course, there's the parent brand, I Am caribBEING, which is centered on Caribbean culture, art, and film. So a lot of people don't know, but we started off as a film festival. And that's largely because I was working in media. Our co-founder, Jean-Luc, is a filmmaker, and it was really my strength. And I saw sort of this opportunity to tell the Caribbean story through the visual arts, through film. And from there, of course, we evolved to become a multidisciplinary organization. Many years ago, when I quit my job in corporate America, I started spending a lot more time on the ground in Brooklyn, and I started asking questions to stakeholders like Jemani Williams, Una Clark, Dr. Hastic, like, why isn't there a Little Caribbean? And no one can answer me, so we sought out to create the very first and only Little Caribbean in the world, which now exists. Of course, there's the caribBEING House, which is our mobile shipping container that is now stationed for 6 months on Governor's Island. So we're one of the 40 arts organizations in residence. And then, of course, there's commerce through our own collection of branded merch, as well as makers and artisans from New York City and beyond that we offer both at our annual holiday market as well as online. And then, of course, we support dozens of Caribbean businesses in Brooklyn's Little Caribbean. So our work is really divided into 3 buckets. There's the experiential, so that's all of the events that we curate. Content, so we produce original content. So one of the things that we're working on right now is our Eat, Shop, Lime series, which is very centered on Little Caribbean small business owners. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, product. So we've done collaborations with the SIL, to have a Love Up Yourself box. So during as one example, during the pandemic, of course, everyone was really into self-care, and we also wanted to support local artisans in our neighborhood. So the SIL is an e-commerce platform that sells plants, and we partnered with them to curate this really amazing experience that was very well received. And of course, our products are all online. This is an example of one of our products. I'm going to just run through this slide really quickly. So this is Kimon. She actually is one of the artisans that's been featured since year 2 at our holiday market, and this is La Bay Market, which is one of the most treasured, I would say, businesses in Little Caribbean, because not only are they a Caribbean market, but it's also a Black Caribbean-owned market. And the owner, Mac, he actually imports a lot of his produce from his own estate in Grenada. So it's a very unique Black-owned space in Brooklyn, and really during the pandemic, really sort of served our community really, really well. There would be like 2 lines, often like one for coconut water, one for just to get into the store because it's really small and tight. And his sister also cooks for the community now multiple days a week. So we also have a rich history of collaborating with large institutions and organizations. This is one example with Link NYC, where we featured very prominent Caribbean American icons. So thinking, Auntie Shirley, as I call her, Shirley Chisholm, Basquiat, another muse of ours. This is Audre Lorde, and just other prominent Caribbean Americans, past and present. And this campaign has seen millions of views. When it started off, it was actually an introduction by one of the deputy commissioners of SBS. They introduced us many, many years ago to Link NYC, and we pitched this, and it really started off as our geography, like let's call it a zip code, like 11226 or 225, and we were able to say, to really justify to the city and to Link NYC that we're everywhere and we belong to be all over the city. So these kiosks actually were live, and it was great just to see engagement on Times Square and Uptown and in the Bronx and Queens, because people get really excited to see their communities reflected, on the sidewalks of New York. So here are a few more examples of our arts and cultural work. So on the far left, you'll see the caribBEING House in one of its iterations behind the Brooklyn Museum. This was an exhibition, a site-specific exhibition called Clotheslines. In the middle was when we did a takeover and activation at the Lefferts House, which has recently been renovated. And we've been pretty involved in sort of like the reimagining of that space from a Flatbush, Caribbean, and cultural perspective. So we created a veranda, a Caribbean-style veranda on their porch, and then also activated the lawn and the garden with different programs. And then to the far right, you'll see the exhibition that we currently have up at Governor's Island, Life with Basquiat. So very like early intimate photos of him by his then girlfriend, Alexis Adler. So this debuted at Brooklyn Museum about 5 years ago. And then we expanded that. We actually put this exhibition online. It's on Google Arts and Culture. And now we have another exhibition on view at Governor's at the caribBEING House. Here are some examples of our community engagement. So, when we were in residency at Lefferts, we also, of course, as I mentioned, activated the lawn. So here's a walkout class, which was a lot of fun. We also facilitate a lot of takeovers of our social profiles by community members who are able to share their versions of Flatbush. And so often it's around food, but sometimes the conversation is around gentrification and community preservation. And then last year was the first year we participated in Labor Day, so we had a Monday Mass experience on the Parkway. So there's Kenya, who works on our team. She's a Little Caribbean program manager, and her twin sister, who works with the God Squad, pictured at the far right. Again, you see some examples of our merch, a curated box featuring all Caribbean artisans, as well as another newer artisan, DeWare, who we are also offering in our online store. This is the caribBEING House, which when we were building this at the Flatbush Caton Market, which is now Flatbush Central, a lot of people came by and was like, Shelley, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Like literally. And we didn't know what we were doing. We just knew that we were building this container and it was going to be stationed in our neighborhood. And from there's so many beautiful relationships and programs that have evolved. It's become sort of this model for different city agencies. So it's appeared at the Brooklyn Museum, as I mentioned, it was born at the Caton Market. It's been at Brooklyn Designs, at the Junction. Stephanie has hosted programs there. It's been at Parkside Plaza, right downtown Brooklyn, across the street from BAM and the Center for Fiction. It's how we launched our annual holiday market. Our market is really become one of our signature programs. People come from as far away as Maryland, Philadelphia. Even though we ship online, they just want to come and engage and be in person in the space, as well as to shop in line and see people. Shop in real life, and see people. Here, of course, Little Caribbean has become sort of like one of the largest initiatives that we've been working on. I apologize for the black screen on the right. It was a video that's not loading, but I do have some media for you later. Little Caribbean is in Flatbush, East Flatbush, Prospect Lefferts Gardens. You all can look it up. It's on Google Maps. And so it goes from like just south of Empire, Prospect Park, and Brooklyn Botanical Gardens on Empire Boulevard down to the junction. And then a lot of people think that it's only Flatbush or only Nostrand, but there are other very important corridors like Church Avenue, which is also co-named Bob Marley Boulevard, Utica Avenue, and of course Rogers Avenue. So really one of the largest initiatives that we're working on. Last year we were really honored to work with Extra Butter, which is a very premium sneaker store on the relaunch of the West Indian sneaker, Nike sneaker, leading up to Labor Day. So they featured many of the Caribbean and Black-owned businesses in the neighborhood. We curated this kind of walking tour. So this is LeBay in his market with his West Indian sneakers. As I mentioned, the caribBEING House, and as you saw, has been stationed around different locations. This is when it was at Brooklyn Museum, and that became one of Brooklyn Museum's signature programs, and it was actually one of their largest programs, public programs, not only for people of color, but just for, of all of their programs. Our largest program at the museum actually saw 25,000 people. Because in addition to having the caribBEING House, we would activate the entire museum, including the garden, with programs. We're really proud that we are funded now where Little Caribbean is funded by SBS, so the City of New York. So we have a 3-year multi-year grant where we can actually sustain and support very, very intentionally the Black and Caribbean-owned businesses in Brooklyn, in Little Caribbean. So we're working on a merchants association, a lot of sort of like one-on-one business support. As I mentioned, the Eat Shop Lime series. We have just about 100 banners down all of the corridors. We're expanding that project. And we have a lot of really great public programs that are also affiliated with this grant. Because we're specifically funded what I think a lot of people in this room would appreciate for placemaking, so creating a sense of place and community, as well as district marketing. So here on the right, you'll see the president of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce giving one-on-one support to one of the local businesses that unfortunately closed down a few months ago. One of our newest and biggest collabs that we have right now is the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. And last year they reached out to us to do a site-specific culinary garden called Plants of Little Caribbean. And I was like, okay, that's really nice and cute, but like, how is that really supporting the neighborhood? So I was able to convince them to create site-specific signage that linked each plant back to either a restaurant in Little Caribbean or a business like LeBay Market, where you can go and buy the actual plants, and recipes. So you can actually cook those recipes at home. I happen to have a skill of writing recipes, so the recipes are all by me and my family members. And that installation will be having a part 2 this year. And then they also have a year-long exhibit called Trees of Little Caribbean in their conservatory. And this year, we've kind of pushed that a little further, and they hired a Caribbean illustrator. She's Dominican-American. She's Dominican, not Dominican-American. And she created original artwork that accompanies the Trees of Little Caribbean exhibition. So we'll be there all year. I encourage everyone to go visit these installations. Of course, our work has been covered extensively in the media, and I just wanted to leave everyone with this, one of our signature videos on Brooklyn's Juve. Do I just press play?
Morning sees that the people have been waiting, the way they were the night on the oil spilled down their legs, bronze flesh glazed black, and then glow in the dark torches, and then fluorescent paint smearing face, tribal war and ready, djembe drum, beat metal, knock glass, and then chip. The sun is dancing down Empire Boulevard with the tangerine silk of her cape wiping awake the faces of her children. The sea of color is multiplying itself and draining people out from tenements, out from their sleep, out onto the sidewalk, and is now washing the streets with music. This morning, Brooklyn is the safest place away from DJs with MacBooks and their music trucks with their cruising boombox speakers. All we have are our instruments, our rhythm sections, hand claps, heart thumps, and chapters of dancing from our history. I hear them say how the music is a restless spirit. I hear they had to warn NYPD about this. I hear how West Indians just take all their culture and all their customs down to everywhere they settle. I hear the Caribbean having a problem with criminals. I hear them talk about cancelling every year, but Eastern Parkway is a bomb scare of a block party. Below the angry sun and sea of liquor, we are crowds of color, beads, feathers, and then red. We are congestion, then clearing and people stampeding down train station steps. We are gunshot wounds to the head and ambulances stuck in parading traffic. We are magic turned morning before the end of the day. We are glitter-dusted bullet shells fleeing the masquerade. And I can't explain the guns. What came first, the islands or the criminals? The name West India came from a murderer, and well, Carnival was the name of a war fought for freedom. There are more policemen than they have food vendors out here with Trinidad and Jamaica and Haiti. The whole Caribbean pushing world rates of violence. So can you then explain to me what culture is? I just think we have mastered exporting it. See, I just think we have mastered becoming it.